computer. Thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and say welcome to everyone. This is our Board of Trustees Parent Representative Candidate Forum. And it's just a chance for us to put a name and a face together and to hear a little bit about the thoughts of the folks who are have thankfully put their hat in the ring to be a member of our Board of Trustees. I cannot say enough. I've said that already to our candidates, but it really is so appreciated because there's work involved. It can be a tough job sometimes being a board member. You have to think about the whole organization. You have to think about people, and you have to think about money, and you have to think about LAUSD and all different pieces that tie into making a independent charter school run. So the way this is going to work is we have 6 questions that are going to be asked, and those questions I'm gonna let all 3 candidates answer the question, but they'll take turns as to who goes first. So that's the way we're going to sort it out, and there'll be a 2-minute time limit. And I'm going to ask Scott, are you going to be okay to be our timekeeper? If you can, and all you need to do is to let us know when there's 15 seconds left, and just nonverbal, just do one of something that tells us 15, and yeah, just so a reminder, and then I'll count out from there, and hopefully not have to cut anybody off, but we do want to keep it fair and equitable. So when you see the signal, know it's time to wrap that up. Okay, well, we're going to begin. We have 3 candidates, and you're going to hear from James Kelly and Sam Eisner and Katrine Kaler. And I'll let them tell you about themselves, because the first question is to tell us about yourself. What is your motivation to run for parent board rep position, and what are your qualifications? So just telling us a little bit about yourself, and we're going to start with this time it's James.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody. So what's my motivation to run for parent board rep? Well, first and foremost, I have a 7-year-old son. He's in first grade, and he's now in, this is our 2nd year at Goethe, and we've just been really impressed with the school. We've really enjoyed the experience. Hendrix, my son, has really enjoyed the experience, even during this last year, which was, I think everybody would admit, is not particularly normal. But we've really been impressed with the level of attention that he gets, and I think it's shown in his sort of personal development academically, and also just like in his maturity level. So we're happy with the result, the impact that the school has had on Hendrix. So that's first and foremost. I think that's kind of wanting to give something back, wanting to contribute something back to the school. That's my motivation. So I think secondly, we've had a really good experience tapping into the community of Goethe, meeting other parents, meeting parents of Hendrix's friends, and just kind of building a community inside of all that. And that's been a really key part. That's been a really key part of the last 2 years for us. So that's, I think it's a really vibrant community. And again, even during the last year, that's been difficult. We've been able to sort of make lemonade out of lemon in that regard. getting a big echo, but and then so motivation wise, it's really just about wanting to give back to the community, wanting to give back to the school. And then in terms of qualifications, I currently work for Verizon. I run business operations for an R&D organization inside of the company. Am I done? Is that it?
Just finish up that part. I'll give everybody a little extra on that.
So, yeah,
This is an important one.
So I have an MBA. I run business operations for a subsidiary of Verizon, and so that runs the gamut of operations, finance, marketing, et cetera. And I'm hoping to be able to bring some of that experience to bear on the board.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Katrin, and you can have a little bit extra time if you need it.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name is Katrin Kaler. I'm the mom of Sawyer Kaler Cardoso, who is currently in Ms. Musio's TK class. We joined Goethe in the middle of 2020 pandemic year. We are an international family. My husband's from Argentina, where we first lived, then in Germany for 8 years, where I'm from, as you can probably hear, and since 2012 in the US. Being such an international family, we definitely raise our son as a global citizen. We raise him as someone who really appreciates differences between cultures and people. He went to a Mandarin immersion preschool before joining Goethe. And you can see from all this that I fully support Goethe's mission and vision. It's very much aligned with how I like to see our values and priorities as parents. I also think that I have very relevant professional experience, which will allow me to successfully represent parents on the board. I have a degree in organizational psychology, as well as 17 years of experience in organizational training, development, and HR. Half of it in Germany, half of it here in the US, really. So my current role is Director of HR at UCLA Extension. For those of you who don't know Extension, it's the Division of Continuing Professional Education at UCLA.
I was listening to a meeting on.
In that role, I am responsible for full scope HR, including recruitment, training and development, retention of highly qualified academic and non-academic staff. We have 300 people and about 2,000 instructors. I also have 3 years of nonprofit board experience at the Association for Talent Development. You see a pattern here, right? Learning. So that's kind of the common denominator in a lot of what I do. That is the largest professional association for workplace learning. I was on the board. Okay, I see you, Scott, wrapping up. I was on the board for 3 years. And during my time there, we grew association membership by 20% after 8 years of loss, and turned around financials as well from losses to surplus. So all that, I think, makes me a good candidate, and I would love to represent parents on the board.
Thank you very much. And our last one for question 1 is Sam.
Real quickly before you go, Sam,
Sure.
Can I ask Biggie and Leslie, can you just mute yourselves because we're getting a little bit of an echo?
Yeah, if anybody, if anybody's not muted, if you can mute.
There, thank you.
And we will go ahead. Oh, I've got one more coming in. Okay, and our third candidate is Sam Eisner. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Eisner. You can call me Sam. I also am the parent of a first grader. My son, Alex, started at Goethe last year in his kindergarten year. We chose Goethe for many reasons. We were so happy to have a school that's so close to our house that offers the programming that Goethe does. I really love the IB curriculum and the focus on the global citizen. We like the diversity of the population, and also my husband is a native German speaker, and it was such an opportunity to be able to have German language education for our son. He has just loved his time at Goethe. We've really enjoyed getting to know the parents at Goethe, the community at Goethe. And so after we went remote, one of the reasons why we chose to come back to Goethe was the ability of the school to pivot into remote learning. I think we were, in comparison to many of our friends in different schools, we were really so amazed and just surprised at how well everyone that we interacted with pivoted to learning and how supported our son felt. And so this is a community we are really devoted to and looking for a way to give back to it. I put my name in for the board because this is one of the activities within the school that really fits within my background. I am a lawyer by training. I work as an in-house lawyer at ICANN, the International Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. It's a large nonprofit multi-stakeholder organization. And for my duration there, I have been working very closely with our board of directors on all matters of governance, transparency, committee work, and that's been for 12 years. So this is what I do, and I'd like to offer my skills to the Goethe board.
Thank you. All right. Question number 2, and this is, as a board member, how would you support the recruitment, professional development, and retention of quality staff? So, Katrin, could you start us off?
Of course. So one important role of a board member is really to provide the strategic leadership to set long and short-term goals and really to monitor progress the organization at large is making towards these goals. And I think that my skill set comes in very handy here. As HR director, of course, recruiting, developing, and retaining qualified staff is my area of expertise, and as such, I think would also complement the current skill set on the board. I would like to first review the strategies that you as a school put in place to address these issues. I would like to take a look at processes and HR metrics, such as, say, turnover. I've seen it in your SWOT analysis. That was an issue in the past. I'd like to see how that developed over time. I'd like to see employee engagement data, if you have any, as well as recruitment metrics, such as time to fill a position, etc. Performance metrics. How do you currently measure employee staff performance? Once I've done that, then I would really advise from my experience in human resources, advise on your strategy and what reasonable next steps would be.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Samantha.
Thank you. Similar to how Katrin laid it out, I think that from the role of the board member, I tie it back to what's laid out in the strategic plan as it currently is developed around having recruitment and retention as one of the pillars towards achieving the educational excellence pillar of the strategic plan. And I think that the board has a really important role in holding the executive director accountable to those planning exercises and having oversight in how those goals are achieved and weighing in where the board has the expertise. And it could be from the operational side, from the unique HR role that Katrin has, but we need to also understand what are the roadblocks and where are the challenges in having that happen. And the board can really help work with the executive director to achieve those goals. But it comes back down to the board's oversight role of the strategy and engagement and making sure that the organization itself is working towards those strategic goals that have been laid out, and in really partnering with the executive director to make sure that the challenges that you're facing, some of it might also come down to assisting in fundraising more and more resources, because that could be a big factor in it, that you can't just focus on metrics, that you have to have the money to support retention as well. And those would all be areas that I would be interested in working with the board and with the organization and moving forward on.
Thank you. And James. You're on mute.
Thanks. I mean, you've both said so much that I would double down on, but I think just simplifying things for myself, I think it's 3 things. It's maintaining a comprehensive recruiting pipeline, making sure that you're sourcing candidates, whether they be educators or administrators, from a range of places, whether it's university outreach or competitive school, schools in other schools in the same market, having kind of a diverse set of inputs to the recruiting pipeline, I think is critical, number one. Secondly, I think, Katrina and Sam both hit on this, but and looking at current staff, the level of engagement of current staff is very important. Not just understanding kind of the binary engagement metric, but like, what are some of the specific challenges that current faculty and staff are facing, and how can you address them, and then how can you communicate that to incoming staff? I think that's important. And then maintaining an effective support system for the employees that you have, and this is retention, right? I mean, burnout happens in so many ways, and I'm sure that the last year has contributed to some of that. I know it hasn't been an easy one for the faculty, but making sure that you're developing and maintaining a community of support for staff is critical. And again, that's looking at engagement, and then not just understanding it, but taking action and figuring out ways to improve it over time. And that could be with a number. Is that my time? That's my time.
You got 15 seconds.
I mean, I think that sums it up.
There we go. All righty. Moving on to question number 3. As a board member, how would you foster transparency with the public and collegiality amongst board members? And our first speaker is Samantha.
So I wish I had more time, because this is what I do. The organization that I work for, it has been identified as one of the most transparent organizations in the world. You can look at our website and find out I'm not exaggerating. But one of the things that really surprised me when I joined the Goethe community was that, compared to the transparency that I'm used to from my entity, that the board seems a bit of a black box. And I think that there are some really easy wins that can be done, such as setting up a place on the website for more interactive, less report-based, but more conversational updates to the community, and even some additional regular levels of reporting, not just on those things that are required, but some less chart-based reporting, and maybe some more narrative-based reporting on how we're achieving towards our strategic plan, what the board's doing, what's coming up that's important at the next board meeting. How can board members maybe step in and support the executive director at the town halls we've been having? It would be great to have seen some representatives at the board at the really important meetings we've been having, just to show support. And I think that there are ways, very easy ways, to build up more communication between the community and the board, so that it doesn't seem as much of a black box. The board is here to serve the students of this school, and I think we have a need to show that we're there and we're people who can be approached, even if none of us individually have the ability to make any individual decision. In terms of board collegiality, one of the things we've been doing with my organization, we have a 20-member board dispersed across the world. We've been experimenting on ways of having just informal social time. So the board has the ability to come together and just talk about their favorite recipe or share an anecdote, their favorite vacation. But it's important to build up opportunities among board members to know each other as people, so that when you hit those hard situations, you have a baseline of collegiality in order to work through those things together.
Thank you. And next up is James.
Thanks. Sam, I at the risk of crosstalk, I really like what you said about kind of feeling like it was a bit of a black box joining, and I agree with that. I think there's a number of ways to make board involvement more interesting, more interactive, whether it's, I know that the meetings are broadcast, but I think encouraging parents to attend. I have attended a number of board meetings in person, and I have to say it's more interesting when you attend in person than when you watch online. I do, like we all need another video meeting right now. So there's a couple components to this. One, it's in the charter that the board has a responsibility to communicate. And that's architected in the charter, and whether it's visibility into the school report card, the LCAP, financial statements, meeting minutes, and so forth. We have to at least be checking the box on what's committed to in the charter. But I think taking it a step further and really supporting intentional involvement of the parent community is critical. And I think there's a bunch of ways to do that. I love the having like a board / dinner meeting, or inviting parents, making things more interactive. I think providing free and low friction channels for parents to give feedback is really important. And that could happen in another way. It doesn't have to be in person. It could happen through a number of channels. And then I think once we're through the pandemic, so to speak, and there's an opportunity to, have in-person meetings, I think it would be great to invite parents and the board together into the same space and host some joint events to give more transparency to what's happening at the board level.
Okay, thank you. And last is Katrin.
Yes. I'd like to start with the aspect of how do we foster collegiality among board members. So as I said, I've been on a nonprofit board for 3 years at ATDLA, 1 year of which I was president. And my experience was that nonprofit boards consist of people who are highly self-motivated, who are really volunteering their time and making a lot of effort because they truly believe in what an organization does, and they want to give back, like in your case, for example, but they also have interests as in something they want to learn, something they want to get out of the experience of being on a nonprofit board. And I made a point out of getting to know all of my other fellow board members to understand what really makes for a good experience for them being on the board, and try to help them achieve that for their own personal development, for their own learning and growth journey. Going through team building exercises together, for example, or like my other two fellow parents said, just spending time sometimes with each other, getting to know each other, our work styles, and also being respectful out of the time commitments that we all have outside of work, and how we can best work together and truly gel and collaborate as a team. Secondly, about transparency, I work for a public employer. UCLA, as you guys know, is a public employer. And what that means is pretty much anything we put in writing is public record. So what does that mean? Anything you don't want to be visible for the whole world to see, you may not want to put in writing. Hold yourself to a high ethical standard. Understand that in this case, as a board member of Goethe, you do represent the school with anything that you do in that capacity. You need to lead by example, be present, connect with others. I really see, just like Sam and you said before, I really see that you, in your role as parent representative, are there to build a bridge between parents and the board, to foster this sort of open communication channel, and maybe make it a little bit less of a black box, if that is how parents perceive it right now. Understand really the pain points that parents experience right now, get that information and carry it back to the board and take it into consideration.
Thank you. Okay, question number 4. How do you see the board's role in regard to the day-to-day operations of the school? And we'll begin this one with James.
This is a juicy question, but also I have a really simple answer. And I think certainly there are board decisions that impact day-to-day operations. Certainly anything related to the flow of resources and information around people, money, geography, facilities, all of those things impact day-to-day operations. But in most regards, the board should have little role in the day-to-day execution. I think that's the purview of the executive director and the administrative team. And that's, I believe, fairly straightforwardly stated in the charter that operational management of the school is the remit of the ED, and of course this highly competent administrative and operational team. So I believe it's very important to articulate that distinction and reinforce the division of labor so that the board isn't perceived as micromanaging, and the administration and operations team can go about their business and make the decisions they need to make to operate on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Katrin.
Yep, like I said before, and I agree with you, the board's role is to provide strategic leadership, to set goals and to monitor progress towards these goals. I think we have a very competent team in place at Goethe to really oversee daily operations. The board is actively involved when it comes to strategic planning, but also being present and attending events like, for example, fundraising. We would oversee how funds are being used, how committees are being appointed, but also represent Goethe in the community. Specifically, I believe that the parent representative needs to really understand parent interests and bring them back to the board. And that, in a nutshell, is what I believe the involvement would be for day-to-day operations.
Thank you. And Sam?
Thanks. I probably couldn't have said it better than James introduced the topic. I think that having a healthy understanding of the distinction of a board role versus a management role is a really important factor of having a well-functioning school or organization. That really is the benchmark, because if you have a board that gets into micromanagement, that steps in, and there's not a healthy relationship for the executive director just to push back and say, that's not your role, that's where you see unhealthy dynamics come in. And I've heard that things are moving smoothly with that with Goethe, and I want to support that continuing. I think the board does have a very important role, though, in helping to set the goals for the executive director, setting aligned with that strategic path, and making sure that the board has that vision, that it's working with the executive director to ask the executive director to move down into the organization. And that is a really key role. And then also, of course, the financial component of making sure that the school has the funding available to it, and the role that the board might have in that fundraising, the role that the board has in overseeing the financing and the budget setting. All of those decisions that the board takes impact the school's ability to have its day-to-day operations run. And having that healthy division, I think, is really important.
Thank you. Our fifth question is related to something I've heard a few times, which is about a strategic plan. And we hit the end of our strategic plan window, and at the same time we were hit with COVID. And so we have put together a strategic plan task force that has been meeting pretty much weekly for the past 2.5 months. And they have been working on looking at the past plan, but developing a mission and vision, as well as doing a SWOT analysis. And so there's a lot happening that is going to be presented and brought back to the board early in the new year. So with that in mind, I've asked, have you read our most recent strategic plan, the one that is posted up on the website? And how do you propose we keep moving in the direction of fulfilling this plan? And what do you see as maybe changes moving forward as we develop the next 5-year plan? So big question, a lot of directions to go. We're going to start with Katrin.
Sure. First, a little bit of background. So I have so far in my career been quite intimately involved in 3 strategic planning processes, most recently with UCLA Extension, where we just now wrapped up our 10-year plan. All university departments have right now finished their strategic planning processes, and I'm right now really coaching department heads when it comes to creating implementation plans. Now that our overall org strategy is there, we have a vision, we have an updated mission statement as well, and we're looking at implementing strategy department by department. And I assume that it's not all that different with Goethe when I say that we have learned so much over the past year. Just reflecting on the pandemic, how it impacted our lives, but also as an institution of higher ed, the way we teach. And we have learned so much about alternative ways in which we can work and be productive and connect with others. So now is an excellent time, I think, to circle back on strategy to see what new knowledge have we acquired throughout COVID, throughout this pandemic, that actually even helps us as a change catalyst to really look back to our strategy and say, what have we learned that helps us to further our strategy moving forward? So I think now is a very good time. Of course, as a nonprofit, at the core of everything is really the mission, right? You want to be able to fulfill the mission. So that is front and center. Then you look back at what's different after COVID. How does that impact the school strategy moving forward? And with that, I would say it's time to see where are we? How could we execute on the strategic goals that were identified in the last plan? I see you, Scott, thank you. That were identified in the last plan, what still needs to be done, and how can we integrate what we have learned throughout the past year?
All right, thank you. Samantha, you're next.
Thank you. Much like Katrin, I've had the opportunity to be involved in directly supporting boards in developing strategic plans. It's been an integral part of my work 2 times at ICANN, where we've done major restatements of our strategic plan. And I think that the strategic planning process itself is such an important process for an entity to go through, even if you're not making major changes. I think it's such an important inflection point, and I couldn't agree more that the COVID year that we've experienced, and particularly the impacts that it has, not just on the delivery of education, but the impact on the students, is probably an area that I would imagine might bring about more major changes to the strategic plan than had we not been through this COVID year. That is one of the concerns that I have as a parent, that I know that many other families did not have as easy of a time through the pandemic and with their students learning. And I think it impacts every part of the strategic plan to make sure that we have both a staff and a student body that are capable of continuing to learn at the levels that we want them to learn from. I also see that there are likely some new risks that come in separate from COVID. I think that the LAUSD request for back rents creates a new risk to the organization in multiple ways, both financial and in forward-looking space issues, and how that becomes a sustainable concern to make sure that we have a healthy school and a place to learn. And I would expect to see some changes within the plan to address that threat that emerged during the last strategic plan period. But I really look forward to supporting the development of the new strategic plan and working with the board to continue that.
Thank you. And James.
Thanks. This is a competitive field. I think I've also had the opportunity professionally to do some strategic plan development, and I think Katrin really hit the nail on the head for me, and that's really looking at what the plan is, but then also figuring out, okay, you have a plan, you've built objectives, how are you going to operationalize those things? And I think in particular over the last year, there's obviously been challenges around that. So I'd be very curious to know, and looking at the previous SWOT analysis and gap analysis, understanding how that changes what the strategic plan goals and objectives are, updating those metrics and measurements, and looking at whatever additional inputs would have relevant influence over the future plan development. So I think that could include, as Sam alluded to, different changes in local and state regulation. I think economic forecasting, the competitive market for schools in the area that we're operating in, the local community, and I think also it can't be understated, takeaways from the impacts of remote learning as well. I think in particular, and we've heard it referenced a few times, but many of the parents I've spoken to would agree that Goethe did an amazing job of pivoting to remote. And I think, what can we learn from that? What can we learn from that experience, and how can we bake it into the school's plan moving forward? Not only so that we're ready for God forbid, the next pandemic, but I think there are learnings there that happen that are relevant either way, whether you have a pandemic or some other opportunity to address remote or hybrid learning. So I saw you, Scott, so I'll stop there.
Okay. And our sixth and final question. Make sure I don't have anybody in the waiting room. Nope. Our sixth and final question is, how do you propose supporting our school's efforts to close the achievement gap? And I'm going to open that up first to Samantha.
Thanks, Chris. I think this is a great kind of tie-in of everything we've been talking about today. Starting from the role of the board, how can the parent representative role on the board support the school's effort? It's in making sure that in the oversight role that the board has on that strategic level, that what's identified in the strategic plan and how you action that strategic plan, that those items that you've already identified for closing the achievement gap are working, that the board is active in its performance monitoring role that it takes on, that the goals that are set out for the executive director, that you're resourced in it, and that you have the ability for you and your administration to bring in new ideas, to continue evolving, to continue looking at how to support those students who need the extra support in order to allow us to close that achievement gap. After the pandemic, or we're not after yet, but through the pandemic, I do have a concern that achievement gap will only get wider for those who didn't have the ability to support remote learning at home. And I think we have an obligation to all of our students to really help see how we can support them. And if I were selected as one of the parent representatives to the board, I would devote myself to making sure that the board was giving the resources and the support needed to the staff to make those educational recommendations to help achieve that.
Thank you. All right. Next up is James.
Thanks. I agree with everything Sam just said. I think it would be very interesting to take a look at the last year and see how being remote has impacted the achievement gap. I presume, and I haven't, obviously have not been part of the strategic plan development meetings you guys have been having, but presumably that's part of the analysis. And as Sam mentioned, that's really, that performing that analysis really has to do with measuring the performance monitoring for the educational metrics that you're tracking, and then of course resourcing change in the right places. I think it would also be interesting and important to look at what are other schools doing, how are other schools responding to these challenges, and have they been successful? There's certainly no shame in calling on your competitors for productive advice. So I think that would be an important component too. And as I mentioned before, I think remote learning, while of course we all want our kids back in school, I don't think remote learning is going anywhere on the whole. I think there will likely be some component of it moving forward. So really taking a close look at how that impacts the gap is really important, because you can't move forward with that if it's going to continue to negatively impact the gap. So there's some low hanging fruit there in terms of access to technology, access to the tools and platforms, whether it's simple internet access or providing laptops for students that don't have them, or addressing and modifying curriculum to be more conducive to remote learning. There's a number of ways in which you could address that. And I see it's Scott. I'll stop there.
Okay, and Katrin.
Yes, I agree with both of you in that the pandemic has very likely only widened the achievement gap. Some parents were not able to assist their kids with Zoom meetings because they have work that needs them there. They were not able to work from home, right? How do you realistically manage virtual learning if you have these circumstances at home? I would like to first really get a good understanding of what our different student groups needs and really understand what parents believe would be helpful for their children. I read in your strategic plan that measures such as German language acquisition track, after school tutoring, or aftercare scholarships were put in place to address the achievement gap. I would like to know if these are the right initiatives to tackle the achievement gap, and also how it developed over time. The strategic plan has been in place for a span of 5 years, one of which is the pandemic year, which put everything upside down. But in the years prior, how did the metrics develop? How did your KPIs track after you started working towards putting the different measures, the different initiatives in place? Have we made progress? And then we look at where we are after the pandemic, if we need to adjust the offering, if we need to adjust the different initiatives that you have identified. Another thing that we probably should add is the aspect of potentially targeted fundraising to support specific student groups to address their needs. For example, at UCLA Extension, we were talking about putting very targeted scholarships in place to hopefully help level the playing field for students that come from less fortunate economic backgrounds.
Okay, thank you very much. And just one last round. I'm gonna just give everybody a quick 30-second soundbite to introduce themselves one more time for the camera, make sure everybody knows who they are, and just any last thought that you'd like to share. So for last thoughts, we're going to go with where we started at the beginning. So first one is James. Can you just give us your conclusion?
Sure. Well, quick intro. My name's James Kelly. I'm the father of a 7-year-old first grader at Goethe. This is our second year. I run strategy and operations for a company called Riot, which is a subsidiary of Verizon. We do immersive media and product development. And I have a long history of experience in business operations and business management, finance, and operations. So that's qualifications. And then just in terms of what I'm doing here, I just, Hendrix loves the school. I'm a big fan of Goethe. I think this is an area where I feel I could contribute with relevant skills to the board, and so yeah, that's really it. I'll
Thank
keep it
you.
short and sweet. Thanks.
Last thoughts, Katrin.
Of course. Once again, my name is Katrin Kaler. I'm the mom of Sawyer Kaler Cardoso in Ms. Musio's TK class. And we love Goethe, even though we joined during the craziness of the pandemic. We're an international family, Argentinian, American, and German. And this is pretty much where we've lived throughout the years until we came here in 2012. I fully support what Goethe stands for in terms of its mission and vision, and would love to be the parent representative on the board. What I can bring to the table are 17 years of human resources and organizational development experience. Most recently is HR director at UCLA Extension in continuing higher ed. And I also bring with me 3 years of nonprofit board experience in which I led the Los Angeles chapter of the Association for Talent Development.
Thank you. And to conclude for us, Samantha.
Thanks. I'm Samantha Eisner. I have a first grader at Goethe. This is our second year at the school. We've really loved being part of the Goethe community. My son loved attending school online. He loves being back in person for the 2 days a week he's there. And it's our educational home for him, and we're so happy to be part of this community. I'm interested in serving as the parent representative to the board because I serve as a deputy general counsel with ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, California-based not-for-profit multi-stakeholder organization where we focus on transparency, on bringing in the voices of stakeholders from across the world. I do direct board support. I support directly our corporate secretary. I also serve as the secretary to an affiliate board. I've been involved in board governance matters in developing board policies and procedures and development and trainings and supporting all aspects of board committee work for the past 12 years. And I'd like to bring that experience to the Goethe community.
Well, thank you. And for all of our folks in the audience, we appreciate you joining us. This has been recorded, and so we will try to get that up onto the YouTube channel so people can access it who didn't have a chance to be here right now. And with that, we are going to bring things to a conclusion. But again, I'd also like to thank the candidates for their time and their efforts, and we really appreciate it. I mean, I can tell we're going to be in good hands. However the voting falls, we're going to be in good hands. So thank you so much, and we appreciate you being with us this afternoon.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Oh, I've
You
got
want to stop recording, Chris?
Yeah, that's what I got to do. Recording, stop.